They already know where the US Open is going to be played in 2049. They have that golf course identified and booked 24 years from now. They know where that golf course is going to be. And we have 2040 goals, but we don't know how the heck we're going to get there. We can't say we don't, as humans, think that long because we know where the US Open in 2049 is going to be. Let's apply that to our own sustainability efforts.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Climate Confident Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, also Tom, although this time it's Tommy. Tommy, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Tom. Thanks for having me. I am Tommy Linstroth. I am founder of Green Badger, and we are a software solution for the design and construction industry to streamline and automate sustainable design and construction and really try and simplify the process of figuring out what products and buildings and practices are green and what we can do to make them greener.
Okay, and why? As in, what made you decide to set up Green Badger? What was it that kind of struck you one morning and you decided, oh, I got to set up Green Badger? And second part of that question, the name Green Badger, where did that come from?
Sure. We'll start with the name because it really starts with where all of this came from to begin with. So I'm currently based in Savannah, Georgia in the United States, but originally from Wisconsin, grew up there, just went to college there. And Wisconsin is known as the Badger State. And so when I was starting the company, it was hearkening back to my roots of being a Wisconsin Badger and being green. So tied it together. Plus, Badgers are tenacious and we are constantly fighting to make sustainability easier, more affordable, and better for everybody involved in the process.
Gotcha. Nice.
And that is also where all of this came from, is like when I was a kid growing up, grew up playing in farm fields and in woods. And when I started going to college, every time I came back in the summers or for breaks, there was less and less of it. And there was just more sprawled cookie cutter developments going up. And so really started saying, hey, that's not cool. All this natural landscape that I grew up with is disappearing seemingly without recourse. And so later in my collegiate career, I was probably a junior at the time, decided, you know what, taking the environment and sustainability, they didn't call it sustainability back in the late 90s, but taking the environment more serious was really something that was going to drive a passion in me and hopefully a professional opportunity. So after graduating and working in business for a year, just really decided my focus, my heart really was in working towards sustainability causes. So went back to school, got a master's of environmental studies, moved out of Wisconsin because at the time it got too cold for me. So I moved south to Charleston, South Carolina, where I got my master's, really focusing on climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and how we can address that from a local perspective. And from there, took a job in real estate development as a director of sustainability. So that really started the impetus of the path towards Green Badger, of seeing firsthand the challenges that we faced as a real estate developer of how do you design, construct, and operate a building in a sustainable manner? And how does that vary if you're building affordable housing units to a shopping mall, to a warehouse or a data center? And there's obviously huge differences in all of the reason people would keep saying is why they're not doing it is it's too complicated. They're not experts in this. It costs too much. It seems too tough. And so really launched Green Badger to try and nip those arguments in the bud and saying, all right, I agree. It's a pain in the butt. Everybody wants to do it. They're just like, tell me how to do it and how do we afford doing it? And so Green Badger was really built to say, look, everyone thinks it costs too much and that it takes too much time. If you can use software to automate it, both of those arguments can go away. And so Green Badger was really born from my own headaches and challenges that I faced and from what I saw others in the market facing, of saying, how do we just make this process so dead simple that there can't really be an argument against doing it?
Okay, great. Who are your typical customers?
We work with a variety of people in the design and construction industry. So primarily and historically, our customer has been the builders and the general contractors, focusing mostly on commercial construction. So we haven't really gotten to the level of a single family home for a home builder. But if you're building multifamily, if you're building airports, if you're building apartments, condominiums, retail outlets, restaurants, hotels, really anything that falls into that more traditional commercial construction space, that's our target audience. And now we're expanding that to start that process earlier to target the architects and designers that are in those same spaces, because they're faced with the same challenges of, we specify hundreds, if not thousands of individual products, whether it's a door hinge or the type of concrete a building's using. Somebody is making a thoughtful decision about what's going into these buildings that's going to be here for the next 60, 80 years. And if it's really tough and challenging for them to compare and say, well, should I use this door hinge or that door hinge or this concrete mixed design versus that, and not be able to quickly and easily see what the sustainability attributes are, they're kind of picking in the dark. And so we think we've got a really good opportunity to not just ensure a building is built sustainably, but hopefully get injected a little bit earlier into that process and take some of the headache and hours around making those decisions easier and quicker.
Okay. And when the building is built, do you walk away?
We've got an operational tracking software as well. I'll admit it's not as robust as I'd like it quite yet, but it is something that you could just turn over. So the challenge we often see is, right, the architects design it, that's one customer group. The contractor builds it, that's another customer group. And then they turn it over to the end owner who may or may not be occupying that building. So it's kind of sometimes a weird transition that if somebody's not building that building to occupy it themselves, they're not really interested in tracking or monitoring it, because really that comes into whoever's leasing that space or taking over that space. So for us in our natural workflow, we've got the ability to do that, but logistically, it's sometimes a bit of a hiccup because it's a completely different audience that we might not have the inroads into.
And what do you see is the construction sector's biggest sustainability challenge right now? Is it carbon? Is it complexity? Is it culture? Is it data, lack of access to data, lack of digitalization, something else entirely, all of the above?
You just covered pretty much every challenge that we see on a daily basis. And I think you're in Europe and have requirements have been around longer and more granular. So I think your market segments, have been dealing with some of this a little bit longer than some of the US market. So things around carbon tracking and disclosure is new, right? The state of California, which is the largest market in the US, just had that go into effect in 2025. The city of Boston is requiring it, but it started just halfway through this year. So I think the biggest complexity is that there's just continuous layers of this onion and they keep getting added. So just as soon as somebody got comfortable with, hey, we're recycling our construction waste and we're using recycled materials, great. We know what we're doing finally. Now, then the new update came and now it's like, well, not only do you need to do that, but now you need to look at material transparency documents. They're like, what the heck are these? Do manufacturers even have these? Then it's like, okay, we just finally started realizing how to read these 50-page documents. And now it's like, okay, well, now you need to have the embodied carbon of everything and how that information comes from a manufacturer through a subcontractor to a general contractor to an architect. You have so many hands in the pot, all with very differing levels of understanding of what these requirements are. It's just really complicated. Again, the frequency that these standards change and get updated, unless you're thinking sustainability full time, it's tough to keep your finger on the pulse. And the fact of the matter is these guys and girls are here to build buildings and they're out in job sites and they're dealing with putting out water leaks and their subcontractors scheduling issues and material delays and trying to get the buildings built on time so that their clients are happy. And now you ask them to be material scientists that can read documentation down to 100 versus 1,000 parts per million. And it's just something that many of them aren't equipped for. If you go to a collegiate university construction program, that is not on the list of electives you are selecting. And so it's a complex subject that's getting thrown onto an industry that's trying their best to get the buildings built how they're designed, but might be missing some of that critical information, especially as it changes so quickly and so frequently, to be able to effectively understand and digest some of those requirements.
And where is the demand for sustainability or sustainable buildings coming from? Is it the developers? Is it it's hardly the construction workers themselves? Who's asking for this?
Sure. So it does come down that it is client driven. So at the end of the day, the architects, the contractors, they're service providers. If the owner says, I want this building to be 100 stories tall, they're not going to say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not going to build 100. They'll build 100 stories. If it's 100 stories and has to be red, they'll do it. And if it's 100 stories red and has to be sustainable, they will do it and they'll figure out how to get it done. So in the US, we see a couple primary drivers. One is the standard, which in the US is called LEED. It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It's an international standard. It's actually used in over 140 countries. It's administered by the US Green Building Council. I think 96% now of Fortune 100 companies in the US use that as their standard baseline order. So if they're building a building, whether it's a new corporate headquarters or a 2,500 square foot retail office bank. There's a large financial institution that works with us. And again, it could be a retail bank that you walk in there with your debit card to withdraw money, or it could be a skyscraper in downtown New York. They apply that same LEED standard to everything. So you've got a lot of drivers from the corporate America side, because it's just sort of, hey, this is our standard of how we're showing commitment to incorporating this as part of our overall businesses. And then you've got a lot of regulatory components in place where you have states or local governments that are saying, well, we also are using this standard if it's publicly funded. So anything that has any public dollars at a state or local level, whether it's a fire station, a library, and airports, all have to incorporate those as well. Or they just say, look, in the city of Boston, anything that's over 10,000 square feet has to meet these requirements. So you have a lot of areas where they've just said, this is how we want development to happen in our communities. And if you want to build in the city of Boston, you have to comply with these. So it's a two-pronged approach of client demand and corporate demand, as that is the right thing to do. And they tend to occupy those buildings. So they are reaping the benefits of better indoor air quality, more worker engagement, more worker contentment, lower energy bills, or it's just the cost of doing business because it's driven by regulation.
Right. I remember visiting several LEED Platinum buildings in the US over the years. Back in, I think it was 2009, I was in the Adobe headquarters, and then I was in the SAP headquarters in Pennsylvania. Have those requirements to meet LEED standards, have those standards changed over the years, or are they static? Would the LEED Platinum from 2009 still be LEED Platinum today?
The standards have changed, and that's, again, one of the challenges that the industry faces, but it's also what drives it forward. So, building that was certified, the first LEED Platinum building in 2001 or whenever it came, I think it was the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. If you built it the exact same way, it would not be a LEED Platinum building today. It's a natural evolution. So as energy codes evolve over the years, LEED adopts the more recent code. So you can't say, hey, we really crushed the code, but it was the 2009 code. Now it's, the 2023 building code that they're using. So the standards evolve, and really the focus of the rating systems evolves itself. So the new version, which just came out, it's called, unsurprisingly, LEED version 5. And they've actually built in that every 5 years it will update. So 2025 is the first year. We already know the next iteration is going to be 2030 and 2035. And built into that is, now there's a much more significant focus on carbon than there was in LEED version 4, and certainly in LEED version 3. So the system reflects what it perceives as growing importance in the built environment and adapts. And then the changes around them evolve with, advances in technology, and where renewables might not have been nearly as cost effective 20 years ago as they are today. And so now to get platinum, you have to show that you've got renewables and that you've got low carbon and that your buildings are electrified, which was not even concepts 10 years ago in the last rating system. So it is a natural progression. It's a natural evolution that continues to drive performance of the buildings without letting us just get complacent. And that's the challenge the industry has, which frankly is good for me. If they made it the same and it was really easy, there wouldn't be a need for Green Badger, but it is complex. It does change. And so that is something that the industry constantly is adapting to.
And which part of version 5 do you think will surprise people most?
They have 3 key focus areas. And of course, now I'm going to drop the ball and should have had these burned in my head, because I just got back from the Green Build Conference last week. The concepts have been around, but there was a lot of formal releases last week. But carbon is by far, in a way, the number one driver of doing advanced carbon assessments of not just, used to be, how much energy do we think this building is going to use? How do we design it to use less energy from an operational standpoint? So that's been around for a while, but now there's a lot more focus on, well, what about the carbon of the materials itself, or the embodied carbon, right? If we're designing this building to be here for 100 years, what are the materials we're putting in? And are there options that are less energy intensive that have a lower embodied carbon, because the decisions we're making are going to be impactful for a century? So there's a big focus on carbon really throughout version 5. And that's the preeminent trend you'd see. There's more about the society impacts of some of these buildings. So it takes a broader assessment of where we're putting some of these buildings. How does that impact local communities? What's the socioeconomic status of some of these? So that's a bit as well. But really, carbon is a big and necessary driver of the decision making around version 5.
Yeah, interesting. And I read recently that the built environment generates more CO2 annually than every car, truck, plane, and ship combined, which I think is a wild reminder of how much leverage this sector actually has.
It's huge. I think it's 39% or something like that. I mean, it's pretty substantial, and it's not getting any smaller, right? It's crazy because we're just adding more buildings, right? I think there's 300,000 new construction projects typically in the US every year, but there's 6.5 million existing buildings. So again, we're trying to address some of the issue through the construction, but really there's a huge existing building stock that's an issue. And I wish I had a magic wand for that because, I live in Savannah, Georgia, historic city, founded in I should know this. They make me take this to get to move here. I think 1787, but it's been around for a while, and not as long as some of the European cities you guys are in, but it's been around for a while. And obviously buildings have changed quite a bit, but I'll come now and see somebody's renovating, a duplex around the corner. So you can see they're taking some of the siding off because it rotted and they're replacing it. But you look, right, and they take the siding off and there's some smushed in insulation, and that's it. So the only thing that is stopping 90-degree hot, humid air from getting into this building is this, piece of wood siding. There's no sheathing, there's no air or vapor barrier. And this city is filled with hundreds, if not thousands of these homes that, they think, hey, I might have an efficient air conditioner, but you better, because it's running constantly, because your house literally has zero ability to stop air from just leaking in all day long, all summer long, not to mention the mold and moisture issues that come along with that. So it's like, my God, I can build an off-grid house covered in solar panels as the one new house that's built, but there's literally thousands of existing homes that have no sheathing or vapor barriers or air barriers that are just going to be paying an exorbitant amount of utility bills. And you can't easily fix that, or you can't just throw in some LED lights and say, hey, I hope our house is going to be a little bit more efficient. So we got to get construction new buildings right, 100%. That's where my expertise and focus is. But there's a lot of smart people, fortunately, looking at how do we renovate the existing building stock. But I do think as it gets down to the smaller you go, the more challenging it is, right? If you're a real estate owner and you own a big real estate portfolio, again, it makes sense. You're trying to lease these out. It's hyper competitive. You need to renovate your space. It needs to be Class A office. It needs to be energy efficient. I know in Europe, they rank the buildings. In New York, you can go in and get an energy score in your building, right? So if you're not renovating these and you're an F on your energy score and somebody's looking to lease space, right, they're going to want to go to one that's an A, if not a B. We don't have that on a house. We don't have that on all these existing homes. And if you're a renter, these are things you can't fix. Or even if you own your home, right, the ability to just rip off all of your siding to put up a sheathing and air barrier, that's not realistic. So I think there's a huge opportunity to try and figure out solutions here, a necessary opportunity, because there's an awful lot of homes that were built without any of these, what are now basic construction practices in place.
Yeah. And does this new standard, does it create a big bureaucratic burden for the developers? Have they lots of forms they've got to fill in, or data they've got to collect, or, things they've got to answer?
They do. And that's, again, it's the double-edged sword of this, right? It's a third-party verified rating system, right? So the credibility you get for doing this is saying, look, I'm not just Mr. Developer. And I said, hey, of course, yeah, that's a green building. Come lease for me. I've got one energy efficient light bulb in here, right? So, to get that credibility, that third-party verification, you've got to demonstrate that you have actually done these things. And unless you embed somebody within the project for 3 years and have them sitting there walking around with a clipboard, which is not going to be a very inexpensive proposition, there's got to be just a necessary level of validation and verification of what's going on a job site, and the design of the building and the construction of the building. So there are those types of hoops you got to jump through, but I don't know how else you would validate what's actually going on so that people can say, this is a credible claim I'm making about my building. Because the worst thing that would happen would, again, you have everybody saying different things. You can't compare. There's no apples to apples comparison, and you don't know who you can trust or who you can't. So the same as we look at rankings on vehicles and on appliances we buy, because we don't want them to catch on fire, so they have to be UL listed. As a society, we take comfort in third-party standards that we trust and know there's validity to. And it's the same for construction, right? I wouldn't get a UL listed vacuum if it hadn't actually been reviewed and tested and inspected to ensure that it wouldn't just catch on fire the next time I turned it on. And with buildings, it's the same thing. But as mentioned, you can't just send inspectors to like be on site the whole time. So you've got to have a process in place that requires teams to provide you that type of information to give everybody peace of mind that what is said they're being done is actually being done. And to me, again, that goes into the value of getting a certification, whether it's LEED, whether it's BREEAM, whether it's, any others that are actually third-party verified, because the alternative is people just say they're doing stuff and you got to take them at face value, which as much as I'd love to say we could, I've been involved in a lot of projects and they'd say, hey, we're going to get LEED certified. And then, okay, well, we had budget changes. So we're going to build to LEED standards, but not actually get certified. Then all of a sudden, nobody cares if this paint is toxic. Nobody cares if the toilets are low flow or dual flush. All of those things just start to fall off the scope as soon as you take that third-party verification away from it.
So obviously we're getting close now to 2030. How do you see the industry doing on its sustainability goals for 2030? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Are we kind of patchy or somewhere in the middle?
I'd say we're somewhere in the middle. I think you've got some leaders out there who are making strides and are fully committed to this. I think we've got a lot more people who are still taking those first steps, and that, sometimes you can be overwhelmed with the perceived complexity around this. And so to say we're going to get to a 2030 goal or a 2040 goal, if you don't know where you are today. So I think there's still an awful lot of benchmarking that's required to start that journey. And I think there's just a lot of paralysis by analysis and saying like, oh my gosh, I have to review all of these things. So I can't even get started. And so our guidance is always take that first step. Like, don't compare yourself to what somebody who's been doing this for 20 years. You got to do, anything is better than nothing. Let's start identifying what some of those things are. I was just looking at, I can't remember which golf tournament. It was like the US Open. They already know where the US Open is going to be played in 2049. They have that golf course identified and booked 24 years from now. They know where that golf course is going to be. And we have 2040 goals, but we don't know how the heck we're going to get there because we're not taking that time to start to plan and to measure. So, we can't say we don't, as humans, think that long because we know where the US Open in 2049 is going to be. Like, let's apply that to our own sustainability efforts. Where do we want to be in 2040? And then what does it take to get there? Where are we today? What's the delta? And then you build an incremental roadmap. None of this is going to happen overnight, but if you don't start somewhere, the perfect is the enemy of the good. If you want to say, well, we need to have 100 out of 100 things lined up before we want to get going, you're going to be here a while. So let's now get 3 things lined up. Let's just get going and let's just start making progress, because it's really, it's the only way we're going to get to any of those goals.
Sure. And where do you see genuine momentum taking place?
I see just a lot of continued momentum in the building sector. I think we work with the contractors and they want to do this. They just don't want to have to figure it out. I think I see a lot of positivity around this. We've spent 20 years making it just too challenging. Like, nobody I've ever talked to would say, nah, I don't want to do that. If we just tell me what to do, right? Like, don't make me be the material scientist that has to discern, again, 100 parts per billion versus a million for the ceiling tile. Like, just tell me what ceiling tile to use, and I will happily procure that with our subs, and we will use the best that we can use. But it goes back to the designers and the amount of time that they need to spend to slog through this. And are their clients paying them to do that? Or are their clients saying, we need to do this as fast and as cheap as possible? So there's a bit of a breakdown in the processes we need to ultimately get there. But I continue to see positivity, and with the falling cost of renewables, it's like, it makes me happier to see when I put solar on my house, when I built it 15 years ago versus when I can see what some people are putting it up for today. I'm like, darn it, I kind of missed that, but I've also had, clean energy for the last 12 years. But that is driving hope from the innovation side of things. And I think as this information just becomes more digestible, we look at, again, the embodied carbon of the concrete. Great. It's a huge impact in construction, but wouldn't it be great if I was walking into the mall and I'm going to decide between shirt A and shirt B, and I have the consumer transparency that now I can make that educated choice? To me, that's a huge thing. Whether people do it or not, right? That's still tough. But When LEED version 4 came out, they introduced environmental product declarations, and everybody was like, what the heck are these things? These massive 30-page documents. Manufacturers didn't have them. Nobody had them. Now there's tens of thousands of them, and you can look at them and you can say, well, here's what it takes to make this product. And again, nobody's going to go read the 30-page document before they buy that t-shirt. But if there's a little eco label that said, yeah, same as our buildings, this is grade A, this is grade F, so that consumers can make those choices, I think it's the same as contractors. They want to do the right thing. Like, they would love to pick the lower carbon option, but are they going to go spend hours researching it when they just want to go buy a shirt that looks nice? No. So how do we continue to just democratize this information so that we can make the right choice by making it the easy choice? And to me, that is what we're trying to solve. And that's how we really continue to accelerate moving this forward.
And what are the big things that construction companies need to do to make a building LEED 5 compliant?
It used to be you could just design it and you could build it and you could kind of fall your way into it. It really does take a much more integrated approach now. Just the requirements are so intense. Again, if you're a builder and they say, hey, we need to reduce embodied carbon by 20%, great. Well, were you involved in the design of that building? Like, did you have input into, are we using mass timber versus structural steel? Because, hey, that's a big difference, right? So I think it's gotten more challenging to make decisions in isolation for the better. Like, you need to have everybody at the table, because you can't just make these decisions at the end, or it becomes just a hope, a wishful thinking in an accounting of saying, hey, how do we go back and we try and count our kilograms of carbon? So to me, it drives more collaboration to really come up with ultimately what are going to be better solutions. And it's, again, carbon is interwoven through so many facets of the new rating system that, again, you can't just stumble into it. And you might, right? But if you want to ensure you're hitting those goals, especially platinum, they've now elevated to get to LEED platinum. You've really got to drive sustainability into the building. There are certain, there's got to be super energy efficient. It's got to have renewables. It's got to have really low embodied carbon. So you don't just luck into that. You don't just say, hey, we're going to get close. Oh, we're at gold. Let's try and get a couple more points. It's too late in that process. So it just requires a little bit more upfront planning, which is a good thing, and a more integrated approach, which is also a good thing, because the table stakes have just gotten raised.
And if we're looking at two very similar buildings side by side that you want to construct, one to LEED 5 platinum and one without, what cost differential are we looking at between the two?
It's a little bit new, so I can't tell you that offhand. I mean, typically, I would go and say you can build a LEED or a LEED silver building for whatever you're building a common, a code compliant building for. To me, it always came down to trade-offs, right? It's like, well, do you have to have marble floors and gold tiled ceilings, or can you put that into energy efficiency? So for LEED silver, to me, it has always come down to trade-offs. Like, we built the first LEED affordable housing in the state of Georgia, and we really used that with the development company I worked for, Malaver, back 20 years ago. And it was really demonstrating, if we can build what is the most cost-effective housing you can possibly build, and we can get LEED gold and LEED platinum, which we did, right? Why could you not be doing this on every single house? And so I still feel that same way. If you put the thought in the planning and you're not just trying to build the cheapest, barely legal thing that you could get approved, you could still do so and get some energy efficiency. I think with the new version, because you do need to have things like hyper efficiency and renewables, which no code would make you do, that you are saying, yes, I mean, that costs more. It costs more to put solar panels on a building than to not put them on, right? Like, nobody can argue that fact, but you're choosing to do those obviously because you see an ROI down the road. So there are things you have to do above and beyond to hit platinum and higher levels of sustainability that pay dividends down the road. But again, you're comparing that to the cheapest code compliant. And code compliant means barely legal. Like, you want to be on that, like, oh my gosh, this building was constructed to the point where, like, it just got approved. That's kind of building you want to go in and occupy and, bring your family to live in. That's the decision you make. Or do you want to be in a high performance, healthy building? That's perhaps another decision you can make.
Okay. And looking forward then, what trends or shifts do you expect to define the next phase of green building, let's say version 6 in 2030 or version 7 in 2035? Would it be materials, data, policy, culture, something else entirely?
Sure. Tough to know in 5 years. This world changes so quickly. But what I would see is this again, this first iteration of LEED version 5 has a big focus on embodied carbon. How it always starts with a lot of these is really it's an assessment of what are we actually putting in our buildings today. And yes, there's goals to reduce it, but it takes manufacturers having data available on all of these products. And right now it's a small subset of these products that have it. So what I see is that this is driving the market. Much like I said, we didn't have environmental product declarations 15 years ago when LEED version 4 came out. Now we've got tens of thousands. I think by 2030, we'll have hundreds of thousands. And then it really allows us to start making those informed decisions of what can we be doing with the design and construction of these buildings? Because if we're handicapped by a limited data set, again, better than nothing. Let's start going. Let's start auditing. Let's start accounting for what materials are going to our building and start seeing some low-hanging fruit. But it's like, if we have that tag for every product and every material coming into our building in the next 5 years, which we certainly could, and it's in a format that designers and builders can make those decisions easily without having to spend hundreds of hours of research. And I think with AI, we will definitely start to get there, within that 5 years. So to me, we'll really start seeing the advanced decarbonization of buildings and embodied carbon because that data will be commonly available. You won't need to have some super complex modeling software. You're not going to have to go through 8 layers of bureaucracy to try and discern that data point from this 50-page scientific document. You'll just have it and it'll be built in, and we'll be able to really quickly and easily drive low carbon strategies into our buildings.
And you mentioned AI and tech there. How do you see tech shaping how, I don't know, project teams meet sustainability requirements over the next decade, for example, or not just for LEED, but for all emerging certifications?
I think it just, again, democratizes it where you don't have to be an expert and you can just ask ChatGPT, right? Like, how do I do this? What do I do for this? And it's going to just make that information so much more readily available. I mean, we started the conversation with everybody wants to do this. They just don't know how. With some of this AI stuff, it can transfer that information really quickly, and that it's learning. What we see interesting on the design side is it's learning from previous designs that if you're implementing it as an architecture firm, it's like, all right, I don't have to redo this every time. What really worked from thousands of past designs, and how do we incorporate that into our new design? So I think it'll allow us to more efficiently and effectively design and construct these buildings with information that is super readily available. Now, hopefully that offsets, the huge negative impact that all these data centers and the energy and water that they're taking up here. So hopefully we can work to solve that problem too. Because, obviously the more we're adopting and incorporating AI, there's a very real environmental impact to that as we're throwing up these 1,000,000-square-foot data centers in the US, water scarce areas, and some other challenges that we're going to have. But hopefully that's a mean to an end, and that we'll get a lot more positive outcome than some of these perhaps very localized negative impacts might be.
And for people listening who want to accelerate decarbonization in the built environment, what's the first meaningful step that they can take?
The first meaningful step they can take, well, I'd say continue to educate yourself. And we've got a ton of free resources on all of this on our website, which is getgreenbadger.com. But again, back to, we need to make it easy for consumers and people that aren't living, breathing this. How do we make it easy? And so let's start thinking of the low-hanging fruit that we can incorporate into our own homes and our own lives, whether it's as anytime a light goes out, we can put in a more efficient light, right? It's pretty easy. You can go buy a ream of paper and make sure you're picking the one that's 50% recycled versus virgin materials. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit just in our own day-to-day life. Some of my employees, they do some easy things like, hey, I'm going to set a shower timer. So I'm not trying to do what my kids do, which is take a 20-minute shower. I got to go in there and turn the water to cold to get them out of there. So there's a ton of things we can incorporate into our own life to make sure we're not just, trying to pass the buck and wait for somebody else to come up with a solution.
And I'm curious, is there any kind of part of sustainable construction that you think is still underrated or misunderstood, and maybe even where there's a big upside if we get it right?
I think a lot of the prefabrication and modular construction, it cuts waste so significantly, and it allows you to get it just right versus trying to do things 30 feet tall up on a job site. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that, and just the advances we're seeing in some of the renewable energy options and alternatives that are out there. You combine those efficient modular systems with some high efficiency mechanical equipment and renewables, and it's like you can start just cranking out sustainable buildings here faster, more efficiently, less wastefully.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Left field question for you. So, Tommy, if you could have any person or character, alive or dead, real or fictional, as a champion for sustainable buildings, who would it be and why?
Oof, that is a tough question. And without being able to think about this, the one that'll come to the top of my head, I'm going to go with Liverpool's former manager, Jurgen Klopp, because Jurgen Klopp has the ability to communicate, to show empathy, to unite people, to bring people together, and to, again, message very well. And if I could rope Jurgen into being an ambassador of sustainability, like he is an ambassador for so many other positive outcomes in the communities that he impacts, I'd sign him up today. Now, if you gave me a little more time of anybody living or dead, I might have a different answer, but I'd also be very happy to have Mr. Klopp as the ambassador for sustainability.
It was also real or fictional, so you could have gone for Ted Lasso, but I'll take Jurgen Klopp.
That is true.
Great. Okay. Tommy, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't covered that you think it's important for people to be aware of?
I don't think so. I mean, I appreciate the questions and the dialogue. I mean, we've covered a lot of what's out there, what people can do with themselves. Like, again, if the lay person can understand this a little bit better, the industry people, I think I've appreciated the opportunity here.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. If people would like to know more about yourself, Tommy, or anything that we discussed on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Sure. The best place would just start with our website, getgreenbadger.com, or they can find us on the usual socials. LinkedIn is Green Badger, Get Green Badger on most of the other socials.
Fantastic. Great. Tommy, that's been really interesting. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Tom, so much for having me.